No, Robert Kesakos is your usual suspect. Welcome back to yet another live broadcast on your favorite football updates channel. It's a pleasure to be here on this beautiful Saturday morning, 23 minutes past the hour of 10 a.m. East African time, where we come to you live, Kampala, Uganda. Thank you so much for those of you that made a part of last night's podcast. We do appreciate you for the enormous contribution that you made towards that discussion. Quite a fruitful debate or engagement that we did have here on the channel. Yeah, in the respect of the weekend preview and of course the UEFA Champions League playoff draws that we did discuss at great length. For those of you that do remember, for those of you that participated in our predictions game that is ongoing, which started yesterday, thank you so much for being part of that. Always a pleasure to see people participating in that. So this morning we'll continue with our weekend preview. As we head into the different match days across the major 5 leagues in Europe. But of course, focus also will start with the Premier League for the extension of the fixtures that do come on Super Sunday and subsequently on Monday, when Sunderland, I think, will be in action before reverting elsewhere. Because yesterday we did all the games that will be played on Saturday and did give our predictions. So in case you're interested in catching up on what we had to say about that, simply go over to the channel. Under the live section, you will see that discussion or that episode of our live broadcast, whose headline should be about the UEFA Champions League, and then yes, it has a UEFA Champions League draws and then the Premier League preview. That's where you will find it. So we'll have an extension of the weekend preview continued, and that's where we will be at this morning. You will indulge me as I continue with our setup and have our audios tested just to make sure everything checks out well before we start this morning's broadcast. But I hope you had a wonderful night in as far as, oh, Jesus Christ. something messed me up there for a second. Anyways, for those of you that are care to know, we do put out shots on numerous occasions, and these days, YouTube is giving us some form of helping hand, I should say. That when we do lives like this, they take a cutout or what they call the live highlights, and so I've been. Initially, I wasn't focusing on them. If I'm being honest, it was after last night's broadcast that I had the opportunity to review them. I went through them, and then I realized, oh, why not? Some are long enough to make sense or to bring out a point, while some are very short, not to give perhaps the gist of a conversation or a particular point that I ended up deleting them, but majority of them I ended up reviewing and editing their headlines and putting them out there. So, and for those of you that keep tabs with our short section, please go over there and continue watching those shorts. Yeah, they do a great deal in terms of contributing to attracting people on the channel, getting us new subscribers and things like that. So for all your efforts, and on that very note, I wish to send my special shout outs to you, Mwami Isaac. Mwami Isaac is a friend of mine who is been doing everything within his power. He's not a football fan. He's more of a basketball guy, but every now and then when he has the time, he is supported this channel in all our efforts to keep growing. So thank you so much, Mwami Isaac. To my colleagues, Paul Chigozi, Alex Alinaitre, Bukolo Steven, and every single one of you out there, Pedri every single day joins us from Spain. People like LFC, Daniel Tuton, even though sometimes you do not have the a lot of time to spare to be with us, I still appreciate you a great deal for always choosing to be with us. People like Pressing Kosi are from South Africa. Then the Yellow Dayak, RIP Sukuna. I know you changed your name to, I think, of Jesus or Jesus, something like that. But yeah, nonetheless, thank you so much for always, choosing to be a part of us. So like I said, we will continue with the conversation going into the weekend for the Premier League and elsewhere, what will transpire in the world of football in Europe. So without wasting any further ado, we have a big game on Super Sunday, and that will be the game between Tottenham Hotspur and Manchester City. What makes it a big game is not the historical context between the two sides, but in recent times, or for as long as Pep Guardiola has been in charge of Manchester City, Tottenham Hotspur is one of those teams that have given him a great deal of headache. So that's what makes that game quite significant. But before we get into all the Super Sunday action, here is a recap of what's to come on match day 24 of the Premier League. Today at 6 p.m., there's no early kickoff. Remember, Brighton and Hove Albion will be at home against Everton. We went for a 1-1 draw in that one. Leeds United against Arsenal, I went for a 4-1 victory for the Arsenal, even though I know that Leeds have only lost 2 games this season at home and are unbeaten in their last 5. Winning 3 and drawing 2, but also have only lost 1 in the last 10 in the Premier League across board, winning 3, drawing 6 and losing that just 1. But I went for a 4-1 win for the Arsenal because I think they're going to mount up a revenge plot against Leeds United, who have not beaten Arsenal in the last 6 meetings. So then Wolverhampton Wanderers will be up against AFC Bournemouth. For that game, I went for a 1-0 victory for Bournemouth. Chelsea will be up against West Ham United. I went for a Chelsea win. That game will kick off at 8:30 p.m. I went for a 3-1 victory for Chelsea, while Newcastle United will be up against Liverpool. For that one, I went for a Liverpool win by 2-1, simply because Newcastle have struggled for results. I think in the last 5, they've only won 1 fixture, and that should be their 4-3 victory against Leeds United. Maybe, yes, the return from the UEFA Champions League where they struggled. They didn't struggle necessarily, but managed to hold PSG to a 1-1 draw. Really, Liverpool were at Anfield, where they beat up against Karabakh by 6-0. And also bearing in mind that Newcastle have not beaten Liverpool in 29 games, lose at Anfield. This is at Anfield, losing 24 and drawing only 5. Really, they have not beaten up against Liverpool in the last 18 home and away. Losing 13 and drawing 5 is a factor that I kept at the back of my mind. But also, more importantly, is that Mohamed Salah seems to be gaining pace and is that player who loves to play against Newcastle. Really, Newcastle have also struggled away from home this season. So really, I went for a 2-1 victory for Liverpool against Newcastle. So then on Super Sunday, Brentford will be playing away to Aston Villa. Man United will be at home at against Fulham, and these games kick off at 5 p.m. East African time, as well as Nottingham Forest against Crystal Palace. And then in the late kickoff of Super Sunday at 7:30 p.m., Tottenham Hotspurs will be up against Manchester City, while on Monday Night Football, Sunderland will be at home against Burnley. So we're going to be reviewing those Sunday fixtures as we do regarding what we expect to come our way. We'll go in the chronological order of the way the fixtures have been assembled, so that we do not skip out on any of them. We'll begin off with Aston Villa, who mounted a comeback in the UEFA Europa League against Salzburg, coming from 2 goals down to win that game by 3-2. Tyrone Mings among the goal scorers on the night with a brilliant header. So, but in the Premier League, they've had some bit of struggles in their last 5 fixtures, losing to Arsenal by 4-1 and then losing to Everton by 0-0. Really, they had a goalless draw against Crystal Palace, but have also won the other 2, beating up against Nottingham Forest by 3-1, and more recently, Newcastle by 2-0. Emi Buendia and Oli Watkins are on target there for Unai Emery's side. In sharp contrast, on the other side, Brentford have equally lost 2 of the last 5, 1-2 and drawn 1. The goalless draw against Tottenham Hotspur, released the one against Sunderland by 3-0, but prior to that, they had beaten up against Everton by 4-2, while their losses came against Chelsea in a 2-0 defeat, just as much as they did against Nottingham Forest in their last league outing, which was a home game at the GTEC Stadium. In terms of Premier League meetings between the two sides this season, earlier on, Brentford beat up against Aston Villa by 1-0. This was very early on in the season. I think it was match day 2 of the Premier League, if I remember correctly. And then, but predominantly, Aston Villa have dominated this fixture, winning 3 of the last 5 and drawing only 1, which was a 3-3 draw last season, but 1. Yes. So yeah, given Aston Aston Villa's ambitions, how good they can be at home. They do not lose many games at home, and I stand to be corrected. I think they've only lost one game at home this season, which was it the loss to Everton? I don't remember exactly, but yeah, I think it was the loss to Everton. So they do perform really, really well at home. That's Aston Villa. They have a very good team. However, they've received some injuries with Yuri Tillemans, Boubacar Kamara, which forced them to go out and recruit Douglas Luiz on a season-long loan. On loan for the remainder of the season with an option to buy from Juventus. Remember, he spent the first part of the season out there with Nottingham Forest, still on loan after his debut campaign with Juventus did not pan out well following his transfer worth 50 million euros in the summer of 2024 to join Juventus over there in the Italian Serie A. So I will go with a 2-1 victory for Aston Villa. The reason as to why I need to take note of my predictions is because we'll have to review them at the end of the weekend when we do link up with the likes of Pedri and Africa Will Never Unite. He's one of our followers on the channel who are participating in this engagement that we are having about Premier League predictions. So I've gone Aston Villa to win by 2-1. So anyways, in the other game that I need to have our heads on is Manchester United against Fulham. We know that Manchester United is one of the most informed teams. In other words, they are one of the only two teams to have won their last two Premier League fixtures, and that's Manchester United, who beat up against Manchester City and beat up against Arsenal by 2-0 and 3-2 respectively, while the other team is West Ham United, who beat up against Sunderland by 3-1 in their last fixture, while prior to that they had beaten up against Tottenham Hotspur by 2-1. So Man United are a team that is on an upward trajectory ever since the appointment of Michael Carrick as an interim head coach until the end of the season. So whereas Fulham are known to be a very stubborn side, I do think that United have something to say about this. But it's not quite odd, or it's not strange or unthinkable for a Premier League team like Man United to go and beat up against gigantic teams like Man City and Arsenal subsequently, and then lose against Fulham. That's something that is prone to happen, or even a draw against Fulham. It's something that can ordinarily happen. So United are unbeaten in their last 5, drawing 3 against Wolves, Leeds, and Burnley, and then those 2 wins, while Fulham on the other side have draws against Crystal Palace, Liverpool, losses to they have wins against Fulham, a loss to Leeds, and then a win against Brighton and Hove Albion. Yes, that's how Fulham have behaved in their last 5. Fulham can be very unconvincing sometimes, as they can be convincing on other times. So earlier on this season, when the two sides met, they shared the spoils in a 1-1 draw at Craven Cottage. For those of you that remember, Monez's own goal did give Manchester United the lead in that one, while Emily Smith-Rowe scored to restore parity there to ensure that the points were shared. But when you go back to the previous campaign, you'll find that Man United beat up against Fulham home and away. And the last time Man United beat up against Fulham, you have to go back to November 2023 when they went to Craven Cottage and won that fixture by a 1-0. While Fulham's last trip to Old Trafford, their last 2 trips to Old Trafford all ended. One ended in defeat, while the other ended in victory. Remember when they went to Old Trafford and beat Man United by 2-1? You remember that winning goal by Calvin Bassey? Harry Maguire, I think, had scored an 89th minute goal to restore parity. To cancel out Calvin Bassey's goal, then Iwobi is the one who scored in the 97th minute as Fulham won that game by 2-1. I think it was Adama Traore who provided the assist for that particular goal. I want to see how United fares against Fulham after being campaign against the big ones, though I think they will win. Speaking of winning, again, Manchester United will be without the services of their defender slash winger in Patrick Dogu, who has been ruled out with a hamstring injury for a period of 10 weeks. He suffered that hamstring injury in their victory against Arsenal. Remember, he had scored in 2 consecutive games, before that injury. And, I do feel a bit bad for him, because when you come when you sort of on the upward trajectory in these big teams and you get an injury that is worth 2.5 months, which ordinarily you expect he will be back by the time he returns, that will be, we should be in April, and that's the tail end of the season. Usually in a big team, sometimes by the time you return, your place is already taken because somebody has stepped up and they've not placed the foot wrong, that you give the manager no reason to walk straight away back into the team. So that's why I do feel bad for him. But I'm also looking forward to see how Manchester United behave against Fulham, following their 2, gigantic victories against those 2 opponents in Man City and Arsenal. However, while I do acknowledge that Fulham can be a very stubborn side, the Sasa Lukic, Samuel Chukwueze, Emil Smith-Rowe, who is very inconsistent, by the way, Harry Wilson, Harrison Reed, you remember he scored the equalizer against Liverpool in that 2-2 draw, and things like that. While I do appreciate that they have a fairly decent team, I do not think they will get past Man United. So I'm going to go for Manchester United to win this game by 2-1. That's my prediction for that one. United to win by 2-1. Looks like I have too many, one too many 2-1 predictions. Anyways, the other game still on Super Sunday, kicking off at 5 p.m. will be between Nottingham Forest and Crystal Palace. I do not think both teams have been on the right side of form in as far as the Premier League is concerned in any of their last engagements, even though Nottingham Forest were 2-0 winners away from the GTEC Stadium. But prior to that, they had forced Arsenal into a goalless draw and had lost their and also had beaten up against West Ham by 2-1. And then when you rewind things further back into matchday 19 and matchday 20, they lost to Everton by 2-0 and 3-1 respectively against Aston Villa. So they've been okay. When you look at the last 3, 2 wins and 1 draw isn't bad for Nuno Espirito Santo, who are 5 points ahead of West Ham in that relegation battle, because they sit 17th on the Premier League log, while West Ham are 18th on that same log. Crystal Palace, on the other side, have really struggled for form. They are winless in their last 5. A draw against Fulham, against Aston Villa, losses to Sunderland, to Newcastle, and to Chelsea, losing to Chelsea by 3-1. Adam Wharton will be missed for this one because he got a red card in that very game. They've sort of been troubled. Their players have been poked. We know that they've lost the captain, Mark Gay, in this transfer window to Manchester City. Last I checked, AC Milan were really pushing hard to try and get the signature of Jean-Philippe Mateta, who, according to, by the way, to Oliver Glasner, won't be in the matchday squad largely because of the ongoing transfer speculation. Meanwhile, the transfer window is expected to close tomorrow. So he's attracted a lot of interest at the 28-year-old French striker from teams like Nottingham Forest, from Aston Villa, from AC Milan, from Juventus. All have been interested in his services, but at this stage, at one point, Nottingham Forest made a bid of about £35 million to try and sign him, which Crystal Palace is reported to have rejected, wanting at least £40 million for that. Okay. Anyways, so that is what did happen, but so Oliver Glasner did say he's not in the right state of mind to be a part of the squad for the weekend. So we'll have to wait and see. But Crystal Palace were also did sign Ivan Guesanda from Aston Villa on loan until the end of the season with a buy option clause. But also, they were also getting the services of Jørgen Strand Larsen from Wolverhampton Wanderers for a deal worth £50 million, with £45 million being the guaranteed fees of that one. So in regards to the Jean-Philippe Mateta news, last I checked, Jean-Philippe Mateta had informed Crystal Palace board about his decision to join AC Milan. He wants AC Milan now immediately, even if initial agreement was for June 2026. Salary is about 3.5 million euros net per season, agreed with AC Milan. Palace and AC Milan on it. That's according to Fabrizio Romano. But anyways, back to the fixture itself. I think that Aston Villa will prove one too strong for this Crystal. Sorry, I believe. Sorry, apologies, not Aston Villa. Aston Villa playing Brentford, but Nottingham Forest and Crystal Palace. I think if you want to survive relegation, Nottingham Forest, this should be a winnable fixture for you. You're at home. It's not easy, but I mean, you go away to the GTEC Stadium and win. You hold Arsenal to a goalless draw. You go away to West Ham and win. I understand their troubles of so many of their summer signings are failing to click because they did spend more than £200 million over the course of the summer, but majority of their signings have not worked out. The likes of Danny Ndoye, the likes of Karim Wendo, the likes of Douglas Luiz, who has since left the club. He was there on loan. Alexander Zinchenko was on loan there from Arsenal. They've all not panned out the way they would have hoped. However, Igor Jesus is one of those strikers that has proved to be inconsistent. He did score a brace in the UEFA Europa League game recently. So I'm going to go for Nottingham Forest to win this game by 2-0. That's my prediction. So Forest win there by 2-0 Forest. Unless somebody has a divergent view on that regard. Guys, like I said, we're doing a predictions contest for all 10 Premier League games, starting with match day 24. In case you want to participate, you just simply have to put down your predictions for all the 10 games down in the comment section, and then we'll review them on Monday. For our point study, it will be 3 points for every perfect score prediction. It will be 2 points for a win or a draw if you predict that team will win regardless of the scoreline, and if it is a draw regardless of the scoreline. So, but there's no points for any other result other than that. Anyways, moving on. Tottenham Hotspur versus Manchester City. That's the biggest game on Sunday at 7:30 p.m. I do look forward to this one. Not because I expect anything big, but usually it's that kind of fixture that can be very, very entertaining. At one point, we did see, I think, a 3-3 draw between these two sides. We know for a fact that Tottenham Hotspur beat up against Manchester City by 2-0 earlier on in the season. We know for a fact that Tottenham Hotspur will do anything to lose this game if it means hampering Arsenal's title credentials or hopes of winning a Premier League title this season. So that's the context in which I look at this game. Last season, for I think the first time in many seasons, we saw Manchester City beat up against Tottenham Hotspur home and away by 0-0 at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, and by actually they didn't. It was the trend has been that Tottenham go to the Etihad Stadium, win a game of football. The Man City come to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium and win a game of football. That's been the trend over the last 2 seasons. And this season, I do not suspect that it will be any different because, like I said, Tottenham did beat up against Man City very early on in the season on match day 2 by 2-0. For those of you that care to remember, Brennan Johnson, who has since left and joined Crystal Palace, and Joao Paulinho were the goal scorers in the opening half of that game to win the game for Thomas Frank's side. But last season, Tottenham beat up against Man City at the Etihad Stadium by 4-0, while Man City won the reverse fixture by 0-0. That goal scored by Erling Haaland. Now, speaking in a pre-match press conference, Thomas Frank was brought to light about the fact that Tottenham Hotspur fans would care any less about losing this game if it means denying Arsenal the Premier League title. Now, about that 4-0 victory from last season, you remember James Maddison scored a brace in that one. He's currently absent through injury. He suffered an anterior cruciate ligament injury during their preseason friendly match against Newcastle. Then Pedro Porro and Brian Johnson were the goal scorers. So I was telling you about Thomas Frank being told about Tottenham Hotspur fans wanting to close this fixture. And he said, of course, him and the players are not in agreement of that. He understands where they are coming from, but he does not condone that. He does not think they should be losing this game. In any case, for him as a manager, his job is not that safe. While they have performed really well in the UEFA Champions League, where they finished what? Was it fourth on the UEFA Champions League log? They want to fourth or fifth, thereabouts in the UEFA Champions League. I need to look at that UEFA Champions League table. But the point is, for him, he wants to win the game. And this reminded me of the season of 2023-2024. That game that was played between Tottenham Hotspurs and Manchester City on the 14th of May. That season, earlier on in that season, Manchester City had shared the spoils in a 3-3 draw with Tottenham Hotspurs. Now, by the time we get around to that fixture, Tottenham needed to beat Manchester City for Arsenal to brighten their chances of winning the Premier League title. Because eventually Arsenal lose the Premier League title to Man City with a difference of only 2 points. So had Tottenham beaten up against Man City, as perhaps many Arsenal fans would have been praying for, Arsenal would have won the Premier League title by a point margin. But anyways, but Erling Haaland scored a brace in that one, in the 51st minute, and the penalty, I think, very late on in that game. Son Heung-min missed a golden opportunity, a goalkeeper to beat. It was a counter, so much so that it had Pep Guardiola on the floor. He literally fell to the turf, and he only rose up when he saw that Son Heung-min missed. And for that, Arsenal fans could never forgive him. Not that he needed their forgiveness in any case, but Arsenal fans know for a fact that you can never rely on Tottenham Hotspurs to help you win a Premier League title by beating only Premier League title rivals. So I think they will come into the fixture knowing that. So, and then again, Tottenham Hotspurs, we know for a fact that they struggled for form. In fact, they've not had it in the Premier League at home this season. You'll find difficulty of finding victories for them at home this season. I think one of them being that victory against Brentford. Really, it's the reverse fixture. It was a goalless draw and 1-1 in the last 5. They've had 2-3 draws against Burnley, 2-2, Sunderland 1-1, 0-0 against Brentford, while they've lost the other 2 against Bournemouth 3-2 and West Ham 2-1. Man City, after 3 consecutive draws against Sunderland, Chelsea, and Brighton, lost to Manchester United before beating up against Wolverhampton Wanderers by 2-0. I would want to get into the in-depth of this in terms of what could happen on the pitch, but I know for a fact that Tottenham this season are not much different from the Tottenham we saw last season. We are doing well in the UEFA Europa League, and we are looking shambolic in the Premier League. So I do not see much difference in that. Tottenham went and signed Conor Gallagher. Now, for a team that has Rodrigo Bentancur, Lucas Bagville, Yuvis Bissouma, Pape Matsa, I look around and I think they need an attacking midfielder in the absence of Dejan Kulusevski, in the absence of James Maddison, but they will go for another central midfielder. And I'm thinking to myself, he is a good player, but not the one that you need. And I was watching, I think, Tim Sherwood share similar sentiments, saying he's a good signing, okay, but that's not the player they need. Sometimes we know that for a large part of this season, Xavi Simons has been played in that number 10 role or attacking midfield role, but he's not delivered. He's not delivered in as far as the Premier League is concerned. He's I can't even qualify to say he's blown hot and cold, because you can hardly remember a game where he blew hot, really. So, and while both teams have their fair share of injuries, I do not see how Tottenham Hotspurs suddenly, even though they are one of the few teams that always trouble Pep Guardiola, I do not see how they win against this Manchester City side, who have now won 2 games on the spin, having beaten up against Wolverhampton Wanderers and then subsequently beating up against Galatasaray by 2-0 in the UEFA Champions League, a game in which brought Erling Haaland and rediscovered his scoring boots, while the other goal came from Ryan Cherki, with Jeremy Doku providing a brace of assists. So, however, I do not know if Jeremy Doku will be available, but because he had a calf issue. Mateo Kovacic still out. John Stones, Savinho, Joško Gvardiol, and Ruben Diaz were some of the players that were out through injury. But nonetheless, they still have Ekušanov, Matthias Nunes, Nico O'Reilly, Mark Gehi in that defense. I thought he was really, really brilliant in their victory against Wolverhampton Wanderers. The goalkeeper, Gianluigi Donnarumma, is of course available. Midfield, Rodrigo Cascante, Tijan Reinders, Bernardo Silva, Phil Foden, Ryan Cherki, of course, Omar Mamush up front, Jeremy Doku, Anton Semenyo, one of the 3 players who have scored more than 10 goals in this campaign, actually 10 or more goals in this campaign. He has a tally of 11 behind Igor Thiago of Brentford, who has 16, and Erling Haaland leading the affairs with 20 Premier League goals. So I think Manchester City have enough firepower for them to go ahead and beat up against Tottenham Hotspur, who have had injuries to Mickey van de Ven, Pedro Porro, Dejan Kulusevski, James Maddison, Mohamed Kudus, Richarlison, Rodrigo Bentancur, Ben Davies, and Lucas Bagville. So, that's how I look at it. Tottenham have not been convincing one bit throughout this campaign. They have not been convincing at all. It's only in the UEFA Champions League where you've watched them and felt, oh, there's a different side to this Tottenham Hotspur side, that has the grit in defending, because I think in the UEFA Champions League they even have more clean sheets than Arsenal, because Vicario has 6 clean sheets, compared to Arsenal's 5, because Arsenal conceded in 3 games against Bayern Munich, Inter Milan, and 2 against Kairat Almaty. So really, nonetheless, I'm going to go for Manchester City to win this game by 2-1. So that's my prediction for City to beat up against Spurs by 2-1. May even fail to score. Randal Kolo Muani, Randal Kolo Muani, and I think Dominic Solanke did score in their victory in the UEFA Champions League against Eintracht Frankfurt. Kolo Muani equally has not been very convincing. Mashua Joshua says, I think City wins this one, not seeing City crumble again after Arsenal gifting them an opportunity to catch up. Indeed, that's a huge motivation for Manchester City, that Arsenal have given you another window to once again catch up with them when they dropped all 3 points against Man United to reduce their point gap ahead from 7 points to a mere 4 points. And like I keep saying, reminding people, for me, the mathematics has always been simple. While Arsenal are still in the lead, they still have some difficult games to play. They still have to play Newcastle. They still have to play Chelsea. All games will be at the Emirates Stadium. They still have to go away to Manchester City on April 18th. So if Manchester City can go on that consistent run that we know they are capable of going on, then Arsenal will have will really, really have a hard time, pushing down for a victory for this Premier League title. So anyways, I'll leave it at that and then move on to the game between Sunderland and Burnley. This game will come on Monday Night Football. Sunderland have not had form on their side recently. 2 draws against Manchester City and against Tottenham Hotspur. Then a loss to Brentford, a loss to West Ham in their last league outing by 3-1. All 3 goals conceded in the opening stanza did not look good on them. 2-1 against Crystal Palace is their last victory. That was on March Day 2022. Then Burnley on the other side, we know that Burnley had barely win games. A 3-1 loss to Newcastle, 2-0 to Brighton, draws against Man United 2-2, 1-1 against Liverpool, 2-2 against Tottenham Hotspur. I did not expect that result against Spurs, but it did happen. And then we are talking about the Sunderland side, who are the only remaining side in the Premier League that are yet to lose a game. at home this season. That's at the Stadium of the Light. The other team had been Arsenal. They were yet to lose a game at home and went on to lose to Manchester United. So really, as much as I'd want a Burnley to find their footing, because I have an appreciation for Scott Parker, I do not think this is the game for them to do it. In any case, I do have a feeling it could be the game for. It could be a game where perhaps Sunderland bounce back. Nonetheless, without Traore and Granit Xhaka, their captain, Sunderland seem to have struggled in that midfield. They've struggled for results as Regis Libris provided his fitness update yesterday on Granit Xhaka and Traore. He said Granit is doing well. He will have another assessment in 1 week. So from there, we will see where he is and define the next steps. It will probably be about 3 more weeks. That's according to Regis Libris. And then according to about Bertrand Traore, he said it needs probably 3 weeks to get back as well. So those ones are going to be huge misses for Sunderland. Nonetheless, I do not expect them to lose, because to lose at home, Burnley beat up against Sunderland in the first leg by 2-0. I remember that game at Turf Moor. So maybe that's the only encouragement that Burnley will have going into this fixture, knowing that they have beaten up against Sunderland already this season. And it's a game that has, in the last 5 fixtures, has provided 2 draws, 2 victories for Burnley and 1 victory for Sunderland. I don't know. I envision a difficult game, a difficult contest, but I'll go for a 2-2 draw between these two sides. That's my prediction. So Sunderland Sunderland 2, Burnley 2. That's my prediction for those games in as far as the Premier League is concerned. Unless there is any other Premier League game that you guys would want me to touch on or revisit before we move on to other places in Europe. But those are the expectations for the Premier League match day 24. So, okay. Since there's no anybody raising need for elsewhere, let's move on. Let's move on to. Oh, sorry. All right. Yesterday there were some games in the Spanish La Liga. Deportivo Aves beat up against Espanyol by 2-1, while in the German Bundesliga, FC Cologne beat up against Wolfsburg by 1-0. Lazio beat up against Genoa in the Italian Serie A by 3-2, while Lens beat up against Le Havre by 1-0. That's in the French Ligue 1. Matching on today in the Spanish La Liga, Rio Oviedo will be up against Girona, Osasuna take on Villarreal, Levante will be up against Atletico de Madrid, while Elche will entertain Barcelona. In the German Bundesliga, still today, Augsburg will take on St. Pauli, Eintracht Frankfurt will be up against Bayer Leverkusen, Hoffenheim will take on Union Berlin, while RB Leipzig will take on Mainz. Werder Bremen will be up against a poor Borussia Mönchengladbach, while Hamburg SV, who are struggling, will be at home against Bayern Munich at 8:30 p.m. In the Italian Serie A, Pisa take on Sassuolo, Napoli have a date with Fiorentina, while Cagliari take on Hellas Verona. In the French Ligue 1, Paris FC take on Olympique Marseille, Lorient. Meanwhile, speaking of Olympique Marseille, Roberto Di Zerbi says he is here to stay. He does see himself staying for the next 5-6 years with the club. So all those rumors and speculations that he had tendered in his resignation following their UEFA Champions League premature exit are all premature rumors. Then Lorient will be up against Nantes, while AC Monaco take on Rennes in the French Ligue 1. That's all on Saturday. And then on Super Sunday, in the Spanish La Liga, Real Madrid will be at home against Rayo Vallecano. Real Madrid seeking to recover from their nightmares that they did suffer in Portugal when they lost by 4-2 in Portugal. There, a result that helped Benfica, qualify for the playoffs at the expense of Olympique Marseille. And then we went for the UEFA Champions League playoffs. And guess what? Real Madrid drew Benfica. Home and away, who will get the better of the other? We only wait to see how that will go. But anyways, Real Betis will be up against Valencia, but the Real Madrid game comes at 4 p.m. on Super Sunday. Getafe will take on Celta Vigo. Athletic Bilbao will be up against Real Sociedad. In the German Bundesliga, VfB Stuttgart, this is on Sunday, take on Freiburg, or Borussia Dortmund will take on Heidenheim. On Sunday in the Italian Serie A, Torino will be up against Lecce, Como take on Atlanta, Cremonese will be up against Inter, Parma will take on Juventus, while in the French League 1, Lyon in the big one take on Lille, Angers up against Metz, Nice against Brest, Toulouse against Auxerre, while Strasbourg will be up against Paris Saint-Germain. Remember, Strasbourg are under the charges of former Wolves manager Gary O'Neill there, while Luis Enrique, despite failing to make it to the top 8 of the UEFA Champions League. Recently, his future had come in question that apparently had refused to extend his contract. There was some contradictory false reports indicating that his contract was due to expire this summer. But contrary to that, his contract runs until the end of June 2027. So the Spanish gaffer looks like he's still here to stay, for those of you that are interested in knowing. Now, quickly, let's drift back to the UEFA Champions League because, like I told you guys, the draws were conducted. Yes, I was telling you earlier on, Spurs finished 4th on that UEFA Champions League table. But in the knockout phase, like I told you, here's the format of the UEFA Champions League. We have a league phase. A league phase is comprised of essentially 4 groups. Each of those 4 groups have 9 teams that play each other at least once in that cohort. That's why each team plays 8 games and they are tallied on a league table. On that league table, the top 8 qualify directly for the round of 16, while for the teams that finish between 9th and 24th, they go for a playoff round, which is the next round, or which kicks off the knockout phase. And in those draws, here is what transpired. For the teams that finish between 9th and 24th, Monaco will be up against PSG. For my prediction, I think PSG will get the better of Monaco and advance to the round of 16. Galatasaray versus Juventus. I went for Galatasaray. Real Madrid versus Benfica. I went for Real Madrid to advance, but I still have headache over the Jose Mourinho factor. Their former Real Madrid coach, he knows how to get results in cup competitions. He knows how to get a number on opponents, specifically opponents that are the size of Real Madrid. He always has a point to prove. Then Borussia Dortmund drew Atlanta, and I went for Dortmund to advance. Karabakh will be up against Newcastle. I went for Newcastle in that one. Bodo Glimt will be up against Inter Milan, while Bodo Glimt looked brilliant in their last 2 fixtures of the UEFA Champions League. That's match day 7 when they beat up against Manchester City by 3-1, and then match day 8 when they beat up against Atletico de Madrid away from home by 2-1. I still fancy Inter to make it through with all their aging players, the likes of Jan Sommer in goal, Francesco Acerbi in that back line. When you look at the players like Hakani Chanalolu, players like Henrik Mkhitaryan, I still fancy Christian Chivu to get the better of Bodo Glimt. And then the other playoff will be between Olympiacos and Bayer Leverkusen. That one, I went for Bayer Leverkusen to advance to the next round. Now, at the round of 16, here is how things will look like. Okay, I need to get this straight. So whoever advances between PSG and Monaco will meet either Chelsea or Barcelona at the round of 16. Whoever advances between Galatasaray and Juventus will meet either Liverpool or Tottenham at the next round. Whoever advances between Real Madrid and Benfica will meet Sporting Lisbon or Manchester City. And we know that over the last couple of years, a Champions League encounter between Real Madrid and Manchester City has always been on cards. And in fact, I think last time out, it was Real Madrid that knocked out Manchester City. Was it at the round of 16? And then Real Madrid got knocked out by Arsenal at the quarterfinals. Then whoever advances between Borussia Dortmund and Atlanta will meet either Arsenal or Bayern Munich. And whoever advances between Karabakh and Newcastle will meet either Chelsea or Barcelona. And whoever advances between Club Brugge and Atletico de Madrid will, for the game between Club Brugge and Atletico de Madrid, I went for Atletico de Madrid to edge it. So whoever advances amongst those two could also either face Tottenham or Liverpool. Bodo Glimt versus Inter, whoever advances has the possibility of either meeting Man City or Sporting CP. So you can see it's Bodo Glimt, Inter, Real Madrid, Benfica, whoever, the two of which advance out of those two playoff games will have the possibility of meeting Sporting CP or Manchester City. And then Olympiacos versus Leverkusen, whoever advances out there will have the chance to either meet Bayern Munich or Arsenal. That means, what that implies is that Arsenal will either get whoever advances between Atlanta and Dortmund and Olympiacos and Bayer Leverkusen. I don't know, Arsenal may want to avoid Olympiacos, but no, they want to meet Borussia Dortmund. But I think better off Borussia Dortmund because Olympiacos tend to do a number on Arsenal. Anyways, so in other words, there's a possibility of Arsenal meeting Manchester City in the quarterfinals or Arsenal meeting Bayern Munich in the quarterfinals. There's a possibility of Barcelona meeting Liverpool at the quarterfinals or Barcelona meeting Chelsea. Anyways, that's the UEFA Champions League draws that we had yesterday. So the UEFA Champions League equally is heating up in high gear, and a lot will happen. Those games, just briefly, I think will be played between 17th and 19th February, and then 24th and 26th for the reverse fixtures. That's for the UEFA Champions League. Otia Sylvia says hi to you too, Otia Sylvia. Good to have you on the broadcast. Let's then move on to the UEFA Europa League, because in the UEFA Europa League, also the draws I suspect were conducted. Is it? Okay. Yes. Here is the playoff for the draws from the UEFA Europa League. Ludogorets will take on Ferencváros. Dinamo Zagreb, GNK Dynamo will take on Genk. Celtic will be up against Stuttgart. Brann will take on Bologna. Lille will be up against Crvena Zvezda. Fenerbahce will take on Nottingham Forest. Very difficult contest there. PAOK will take on Celta. I think Celta Vigo. Panathinaikos will be up against Victoria Pilsen. Now, remember, the format in the UEFA Europa League is not different from the format in the UEFA Champions League. The two are identical, just as well as the UEFA Conference League. In the UEFA Europa League, it was Aston Villa and Lyon who, Lyon came top, Aston Villa second, all with 21 points. They only lost one fixture during the league phase. Then you had Midtjylland, Real Betis, FC Porto, Braga, Freiburg, and Roma, who completed the top 8. So in between there, you had Genk, Bologna, Stuttgart, Ferencváros, Nottingham Forest, Victoria Pilsen, Crvena Zvezda, Celta, PAOK, Lille, Fenerbahce, Panathinaikos, Celtic, Ludogorets, Dinamo, Brann as the teams that finished between 9th and 24th. While the teams that got relegated included Maccabi Tel Aviv, Malamo, Utrecht, Nice, Rangers, Strasbourg, Basel, Feyenoord, Go Ahead Eagles, FCSB, Sturm Graz, and Young Boys. That's for that's in as far as the UEFA, the UEFA Europa League is concerned in that regard. So also that action will try to keep tabs on it, going into the next phase of the competition. The UEFA Conference League playoffs will also be taking place. A majority of the teams that play in the UEFA Conference League are not very known to me, apart from the likes of Crystal Palace, apart from the likes of Fiorentina, apart from the likes of AZ Alkmaar, and things like that. So it can be plenty of things to talk about. Quickly, let's go to the transfer gossip as we look to wrap up this morning's engagement. Inter Milan are interested in taking Liverpool's Curtis Jones. Now, I do not know why Liverpool would even entertain those discussions, not because he is too good a player to let go, but given their shortage in squad numbers, I do not think I would be encouraged. But anyways, according to Fabrizio Romano, Inter Milan are in talks with Liverpool over a loan switch for midfielder Curtis Jones, 25, with an option to buy the England midfielder. Arsenal could offer Brazilian forward Gabriel Jesus, 28, and Gabriel Martinelli, 24, as part of a deal to sign Atletico de Madrid and Argentine forward Julian Alvarez at 25. Now, that's according to Team Talk. Now, Arsenal being linked with a move for Julian Alvarez is a rumor that has been there since last summer, and during the course of this January transfer window, that speculation further intensified that indeed there's an admiration for Julian Alvarez. However, swapping him for Gabriel Jesus and and Gabriel Martinelli, I can't help but feel that Arsenal will be cheated, because I know Gabriel Jesus, if he stays fit and bangs in a couple of goals, could be worth about at least 25 to 30 million pounds. Then when you look at Gabriel Martinelli, given his age profile, 24 years of age, he could fetch no less than 50 million pounds. So but anyways, makes sense, because Julian Alvarez is worth 80 million pounds plus, maybe it makes sense. But it depends on where you're trading them for, because Gabriel Martinelli, if you trade him with the Saudis, they will give you 80 million pounds. They are at least capable of it. Anyways, Arsenal also did agree a deal to sell Alexander Zinchenko, 29-year-old Ukraine midfielder, for about 1.3 million pounds. Initially, it was a loan deal, and the two teams decided to go into negotiations for a permanent transfer. That 1.3, it speaks to Arsenal's lack of negotiating power and Arsenal's poor selling mechanisms when it comes to selling players. 1.3 million pounds is peanuts. Anyways, there are add-ons included in that, but that's if Ajax can qualify for UEFA Champions League football. Anyways, meanwhile, Nottingham Forest are exploring a deal to sign Manchester City's 33-year-old goalkeeper, Stefan Ortega, whose contract expires in the summer. That's according to Florian Plettenberg in Sky Germany. Nottingham Forest also made a move for Wolves' Jose Sa, because apparently Matt Sells has not had a campaign as good as he had at the previous campaign, where he kept 13 clean sheets and shared the Golden Glove with Arsenal's David Raya. Then Everton midfielder Dwight McNeil, 26, is another option for Nottingham Forest, but the Toffees struggle to source a replacement for the Englishman, may make a deal tricky. That's according to Sky Sports. Dutch forward Joshua Zirkzee wants to stay at Man United for the rest of the season, having been repeatedly linked with a move back to Italy, with AC Roma interested. That's according to The Sun. Now, this transfer speculation and gossip is compiled by BBC Sport. So that's our source, in case you're wondering, but also for purposes of transparency and giving credit to the respective sources. Argentine center forward Lautaro Rivero of River Plate is being monitored by Manchester City, Man United, Tottenham, Atletico de Madrid, Juventus, and Strasbourg. The 22-year-old reportedly has an £86 million release clause. I don't think any of those clubs is going to spend 86 million pounds on a 22-year-old defender. No, not even Man City. Later on, Spurs or Atletico de Madrid or Juventus, not even Strasbourg. Anyways, Real Madrid are ready to cash in on French midfielder Eduardo Camavinga, with Arsenal and Liverpool keen on signing the 23-year-old. Aston Villa have received a loan bid from Hoffenheim for their Scotland under-21 striker, Roy Wilson. That's according to Sky Sports. While according to TalkSport, Wolves are interested in signing Scotland striker Che Adams, with the 29-year-old at the Italian side Torino, since leaving Southampton on a free transfer in the summer of 2024. Karim Benzema is considering a return to Europe or finding a club in Major League Soccer after discussions of a new deal in Saudi Arabia turned Sarr, the 38-year-old former Real Madrid and French forward, will be out of contract with Al Ittihad in June. That's according to ESPN. Manchester City are considering bringing back Norway midfielder Sverre Nyepan, 19, who is on loan at Middlesbrough, into their squad for the rest of the season. That's according to the Manchester Evening News. While Barcelona are planning a summer bid for 28-year-old Manchester United and Argentina centre-back Lisandro Martinez, according to Fichejas in Spanish. So that's the latest stuff from the world of transfer gossip and speculation, but expect some deals to get over the line as we look to close out the transfer window of January. Things are happening or will happen thick and fast in the final days, as we know ordinarily. That's how things go really at the tail end of each window. Somebody reached out in my private inbox for me to do a recap on that Arsenal game. I mean, guys, I gave you the facts. Leeds are not going to be a walkover. Like I said, they are unbeaten the last 5. Dominic Calvert-Lewin has been one of the most on-form players in as far as I think the Premier League is concerned. I think he has 9 Premier League goals. They are unbeaten in the last 5, winning 3 and drawing 2. In the last 10, they've only lost 1. That lost to Newcastle. They've drawn 6. They've won 3. So really, they've been a bit of a difficult opponent to go about this season. You remember how they beat up against Chelsea, how they drew against Liverpool, how they forced United in a draw. So they are that good a team, or looking brilliant. And Daniel Fekir will know. He knows it's not easy. He will know that it's not easy, but Daniel Fekir will know that if they put in a good shift against this seemingly fragile Arsenal, not by the stature of the quality in their squad, but by recent form, because they are winless in the last 3, drawing 2 and losing the other, is a team that you can, if you give it a good go, defend properly, then you can get something out of them. However, for Leeds, who tend to play a bit of open and expansive football, I do think that Arsenal can edge that one. While many have gone with a narrow victory, 2-1, others 3-2, I went for a 4-1 victory. I think I suspect we could see a little bit of shift in style of play in this Arsenal side. We could experience a more direct Arsenal the way we saw them against Kairat Almaty. Of course, they were as the case has been throughout the entirety of the season, they've literally been the orchestrators of their own downfall. Because when you look at many of the goals they've conceded, they could have been very avoidable goals. They could have done better. Look at how they applied themselves against Manchester United. They did not close down spaces. Martin Zubimendi gives away the ball. David Raya was, absent-minded. He did not move towards the right-hand side of goal to try and help him out, to provide him that channel. This idea of bouncing the ball sideways, back centrally. The captain, Martin Odegaard, his numbers have really, really suffered. Apologies on the background noise. Kids are playing on the outside. But I was saying his numbers have really, really, really suffered. Martin Odegaard has 1 goal and 3 assists throughout this campaign. Now, of course, Mikel Arteta jumped to his defense to say he's not played as many minutes as he has played in ordinarily in previous seasons. But I mean, those numbers are really, really poor for the Arsenal captain, who we know is capable of impacting play by creating chances, by creating goal-scoring opportunities, but he cannot affect the game given the positions that he tends to occupy in the game. How? Because I often feel frustrated when he overly drifts backwards into the lower third of the midfield instead of remaining within the middle third to affect. Let Martin Zubimendi and Declan Rice do their job. Let them be the ball carriers from deep onto you, as opposed for you. I mean, there's one time when Martin Odegaard, I was watching a moment of play, and he literally formed a back 3 with Arsenal. He had Gabriel Magalhaes to the left, William Saliba to the right, and he was at the center, in the middle of what would be a back 3. And I was thinking to myself, where is Martin Zubimendi? Where's Declan Rice? They ought to be in that position, not you. You're supposed to be on the other side, because you're the player that can ping that point pass, that can make that breakthrough pass. And of course, he needs to take perhaps lesser touches of the ball. In case he needs an idea of how that ought to be done. Let him go back and review the game that Arsenal won against Kairat Almaty by 3-2. Ebelechi Eze was doing all those things. Quick touches, finding people in the right spaces. There's a through ball that he plays to Maslow Skelly. There's another to Gabriel Jesus. There's another to Gabriel Martinelli, and so many others. Simple things. Ball is passed to him, controls it, pass in between the lines, being just direct. When you look at Arsenal's first goal, it's Ebelechi Eze receives the ball, passes it straight to onto Kai Havertz, who then quickly does the turn and sends Victor Gyökeres to his way, and bang, he scores. When you look at Ben White, he receives that ball for Arsenal's second goal. As soon as he receives the ball, I think from Miles Lewis Kelly, his head is up, long pass to Kai Havertz, bang, goal. So Arsenal had that directness about them in their victory against Kairat Almaty. So I have a feeling that we could see a remodeling of that Arsenal. Is Kai Havertz going to be given the chance to start? I do not know. But I did like the way they patterned with Victor Gyökeres. They looked fluid. The way they make their runs. They looked like they had played together before for more than 10 games. They had a little bit of chemistry. Maybe I was just reading too much into it. Hi, Super Tube. Good to have you on the broadcast. Kindly like the broadcast, but it's a pleasure to see you here with us. So there was that bit of chemistry between Kai Havertz and Victor Gyökeres, and it reminded me of the Kai Havertz that I think the world admired at Bayer Leverkusen. Not playing as a striker, but playing as a number 10 behind a striker. We know that as a midfielder, as an 8, he's not much different from a Mikel Merino profile player. But as a 10, I do not know. I think he looked really, really brilliant. Of course, it was Kairat Almaty. We may not get too carried away. But against an opponent like Leeds United, whose caliber I do not think is so many miles away from that of Kairat Almaty, I think it's worth trying out. I do not know whether Mikel Arteta will afford him the starting slot in the starting 11. I do not know whether it will be Ebelechi Eze, but I mean a single pivot of Declan Rice or Martin Zubimendi with Ebelechi Eze or Martin Odegaard and Kai Havertz is one that could perhaps Arsenal may need to get their forward line ticking, because they've been far from convincing this season. 5 goals in the Premier League for Leandro Trossard, 5 goals for in the Premier League for Victor Gyökeres. They are their top scorers in the Premier League. Next year you have Declan Rice, Mikel Merino, I think Gabriel Magalhaes, I don't know who else, all have 4 goals. I mean, they've been that poor. Anyways, guys, allow me to wrap it up here. You've been such a wonderful audience. Thank you so much, Mr. Joshua, Otia, Sylvia, SuperTube, and every single one of you that has been managed to be part of this morning's podcast. Allow me to wrap it up here for our weekend review and for our weekend preview. We'll look to do more content in the coming week, but that's the end of it for us today. Have a blessed weekend, and I'll see you guys on Saturday night in our late night podcast. Bye-bye for now.